Hi everyone, Tina Darling, the founder and CEO of IAS Marketing Services. Since I've been getting an alarming number of questions from friends, family, and colleagues regarding the proposed settlement agreement between the National Association of Realtors and the Sitzer-Burnett plaintiffs, I thought it was time to bring in a pro to answer some of those. So today I'm joined by Alex Krumm, a current director for the Florida Realtors organization. He's also served on the local board of realtors here in Sarasota since 2014. He was the president of that board in 2021 and is the broker owner of NextHome Excellence right here in Sarasota. Thank you, Alex, for your time today.
Oh, it's my pleasure entirely, Tina. I'm excited to talk about this. This is big news. It's not necessarily new news. We've been looking at this for a long time. This has been kind of coming to the surface, and honestly, the outcome was not that big a surprise. One of the things that I think that it's important that we talk about today, though, is that I do think that we should talk about how this is going to affect the home buyer and the seller process. I think we should talk about what this is going to mean for realtors. Can we do a little bit of that today?
Absolutely.
I love it.
I'd like to dive right in. I've been getting a lot of questions. I own a marketing company. I am not a realtor. So I can't answer these questions, and that's why I decided it was time to talk to somebody who could. So we're going to dive right in with some of these questions.
Yeah, let's do it.
Will this settlement change the way Americans buy and sell homes?
Fundamentally, no, I don't think so at all. So realtors, a lot of the time, have filled gaps. People don't buy and sell homes because there are realtors involved. It is true that when people buy homes, they typically have more success with realtors. It is true that when people sell homes, they typically have more success with realtors. But ultimately, the process itself is detailed, it is complicated, it's complex, and professionals across the board are going to be in demand. And a buyer is well served and is going to find that very quickly in today's market, what that looks like. So I do expect that realtors are going to be involved in the purchase side of the transaction. I do completely expect realtors to be involved on the listing side of the transaction. There's nothing going on differently over there, or if it's minor over there compared to what's happening on the buyer's side. But at the end of the day, realtors are going to be employed by people who need to do business with the purchase and the sale of real estate, with the rental of real estate. And that, just because of this lawsuit and this settlement, people are still going to have babies. People are still going to die and get divorced. They're still going to outgrow the homes that they're in. They're still going to want to have investment properties. And all of those are complicated transactions where a realtor has real value, actual value.
Right. So is the 6% commission on buying or selling a home gone?
Number one, what 6% commission? Just kidding. I know that is a misconception that has been out there. It has been since the very beginning of time. I do think that is a fundamental misconception about what's happening right now, and it did come up in the lawsuit. But the truth is that there is no such thing, and there never was a standard commission in real estate. It has typically and often been negotiated as a percentage of the purchase price, but those rates have varied forever and ever and ever. You can see it in the MLS with different offers of compensation. So sellers are offering different amounts, their brokers are offering different amounts, and then also, and I can tell you this, having been a listing agent for about the last 18 years, is that sellers are often going to list and sell at different rates. And I have negotiated those rates. The agents at my company have negotiated those rates, sometimes higher, sometimes lower. And that part I don't expect to change. What I do expect to change, because this is important, is that I do expect that buyers are going to probably end up paying just a little bit less, but sometimes out of pocket for their realtors. And that's a difference, because the credits that sellers had previously been offering as a finder's fee for those realtors are now available to buyers directly. And that is going to be the biggest challenge that buyers realtors are going to face going forward.
Okay. So that being said, are sellers now prohibited from offering buyers agents compensation?
Sellers can offer compensation, which is wonderful, because that is what actually creates an environment in which sellers can sell their home as fast as possible for as much money as possible. And so what you end up seeing then is that sellers can offer that compensation and will offer that compensation. They are going to be prohibited from doing it in our MLS, which is a big deal, because that's where it's always been added. That's where it's always been enforced. And so that is one of the things that we as an industry are going to have to figure out over the coming days is how are we still going to accomplish the advertisement of this? How are we going to impress upon potential buyers and specifically their realtors about the property? I do expect realtors are still going to show properties regardless of the compensation. They're just going to have to figure that out in advance from their buyers, what they're willing to work for. And that's the way that it should have been for years and years and years. It's how it works in most businesses.
I agree. Having grown up in this industry, I remember watching my mother and my grandmother and my brother and now my daughter showing property with no guarantee of getting paid in the end. I mean, they're out there, they're investing their time, they're doing the research, and if the buyer ends up not buying or decides going a FSBO route, for sale by owner, kind of route, sometimes the agent gets cut out altogether and the buyer's agent is left with nothing except copious amounts of time that they've spent doing this. It's an investment, I know, and it's the cost of doing business sometimes, I get, but that has always just kind of thrown me off that they don't get paid.
I know.
If they don't find them a house.
It's wild to me. And I do think that as we look at today, a lot of people see this gray cloud of this and they say, this is going to be it. This is it. This is Armageddon. I see totally a silver cloud. I see a silver cloud from top to bottom. This is what we have now is we have buyers who understand transparently and fundamentally how we get paid, how much we're going to get paid. We're going to be able to explain to them what our expenses are, and that's going to prompt us, which we should have been doing, a lot of us have been doing, but not all of us have been doing for years and years and years, which is just to show buyers what their costs are going to be and to help them anticipate what that looks like. And what it's going to force realtors to do is to be able to deliver value, to be able to explain very concisely and very comprehensively what it is that a buyer's agent is actually going to be able to do, because at some point they're going to be sitting across from a buyer and they're going to ask a buyer for a certain amount of dollars, and the buyer is going to have to decide whether or not that realtor is worth those amount of dollars. And you're going to have different realtors who are worth different amounts. You definitely are. And so I expect there to be some free market negotiation that's going to happen there, which is great. That should have been there. But the other thing, and here's the biggest, most silver part of this, is that in 18 years, the biggest frustration, most constant frustration, it's a headache and has been from the beginning, are buyers who choose to go different ways, who use multiple realtors at the same time. Nothing in any of our agreements is going to mandate that a buyer purchase a property. It is simply going to create an enforceable agreement that if we're going to do work for the buyer and we successfully close, in most cases, there's going to be a lot of different ways that it's structured, including some retainers, but we won't get into all the different ways that realtors can get paid. But what will happen then is that on the back end of it is that we're going to know who our customers are, and we're going to be able to deliver to them more consistent, better, faster results, because so much of our time is freed simply by working with people who want to work with us.
Right. Very true. So one of the most prominent questions I'm getting is, I don't have to use a buyer's agent any longer. Like I don't have to call a realtor when I start house shopping.
Right.
So they never had to use a buyer's agent to begin with.
Never had to.
However, and I've always said to all of my friends and family, don't ever buy a house without a realtor. Whether it's a new house, a resale, it doesn't matter. I don't recommend you go to court without an attorney. I don't recommend you go into the operating room without a surgeon, and I don't recommend you buy a home without a realtor. So now they're thinking, wait, I don't need a realtor anymore? And how do we explain to them the value?
Well, that is going to be the individual agent's responsibility to understand what it is that they're specifically going to be doing, and then also to be able to convey that. What I will say is that having watched this as a buyer's agent, as a team leader, now as a company owner, and having watched well over 1,000 transactions fall under our banner, is that at the end of the day, the biggest mistakes that people made was poor purchases. It was bad advice. It was picking neighborhoods that they didn't really want to be in, that didn't quite fit their lifestyle. It had properties that people would walk into and would be faced with all sorts of different unforeseen repairs, expenses that they didn't have to, simply because they didn't have a realtor who was by their side. And the realtor, by the way, saves people money on the negotiations almost every time. The realtor is really profitable for the buyer. The realtor can make sure that the buyer gets all the necessary inspections that they understand and have all the information that they need to make the smartest, wisest, best decision for themselves. And a really great realtor will find buyers the best property available at the best price available and the best terms that's available to that particular buyer. And if you talk to realtors, which I know that you do all the time, but if you talk to realtors, the ones who really like the parts of their job the best are the ones who work with home buyers, are the ones who help people realize those goals and those dreams. And it's a magical experience to help a person buy their first home. It's a magical experience just to help them anywhere along their home buying journey. So I don't expect that part to change a whole lot. And to go at it without a realtor though, Tina, and maybe I'm a little biased, but maybe I just know better. That's silly.
Having grown up in this industry, I could probably very well handle the purchasing of my own home. I mean, I've written contracts. I've been an assistant to some of the top producers in this town. I could do it. I never would. It would terrify me that I might miss something that you're trained to see. So I tell people all the time, like, don't do it without a realtor. I'm telling you, don't do it.
Can I give you a real example? A real example of something that happened to me before I got my real estate license. And it was one of those things that actually caused me to get my license. It was a real story from my youth. Is that I closed on my first house when I was 26. That was my very first house that I had ever purchased. And it was a beautiful home. It had a great corner lot. I loved everything about it. It was a first home, so it wasn't perfect. We moved in, it hadn't been occupied in a little while, and pretty quickly, water would start backing up where water wasn't supposed to back up. And I had done a home inspection for this property. It hadn't been extremely comprehensive. It turns out that the cast iron pipes underneath my home had become completely collapsed. They had roots, and suddenly there was no out for any of the water that was going through my home. And so within the first 6 months of owning my first property, we had to tear out a kitchen. We had to cut through the beautiful terrazzo floor right through my master bedroom and replace the entire kitchen just so that we could take a collapsed iron pipe and turn it into PVC. That part of the repair, real small, but the destruction of my floor, the replacement of my kitchen, these are things that are avoidable, easily avoidable, with the right advice. And we have the tools and we have the technology, but that's one of those inspections that buyers might not think of. Could a buyer get through the paperwork? Maybe. Probably, because there's a realtor or a real estate attorney somewhere who's going to make sure that that happens. Could they negotiate a price? Could they negotiate the best price? Could they negotiate the best price based on other recently sold properties and also identify other homes that might even work better for the buyer that they might like more at a lower price? The question as it starts to unfold is maybe. And when you start putting all those maybes on the table at the same time, why would you? Right. Just have a Sherpa, have a guide.
Right.
Get through it and make it profitable.
That's my feeling. This is single-handedly the largest purchase of most people's lives is their home. I would never feel comfortable with all the maybes. It's like I would need a professional to tell me what I'm doing. That's me, and I hope that that's the majority of the people watching. So you talk about this not just being a silver lining, but an actual silver cloud. And the only thing that puts the grayness in my eyes is how will this affect the buyers who have no additional funds to bring to the closing table to compensate the buyer's agent? First-time home buyers, buyers using a VA mortgage or some other type of down payment or closing cost assistance program like Hometown Heroes. Those people have no more money. They have this much money to buy a home. How are they going to pay you?
All right, well, let's take the VA out of that for just a second because that's a special case. I will come back and I'll talk about that. But when you're talking about most of your home buyers who are purchasing, who are especially first times, but it's not everybody. A lot of people come at a home purchase and it takes what they have to be able to do this. And it's a stretch to get there. It's not a cheap thing. It's a very valuable thing, but it is not necessarily a cheap thing. And so those buyers have been and still are and have always been able to get credits from the seller at closing. And honestly, the commission, the cooperative commission is a credit towards the buyer for their for their work, and it just happens to get paid. The format of that has just been paid differently. It's been paid by the seller directly to the seller's broker, and then from the broker it makes it through. Now we're just separating that just a little bit. But a seller has always been able to pay for any of the closing costs. So they have constantly paid for credits for insurance. They have a lot of the time come up with credits for things like small repairs that are done for the property. Those are the same, it's the same principle. And so that's going to absolutely apply. Now, there is a caveat and there is a carve out in that right now for VA. So VA is our Veterans Affairs loan. It's a great loan. It's one of the best loans I've ever worked with. And it's exclusively available to our veterans of our armed services, and very well deserving. But right now, and this is one of those unforeseen consequences that I know that they are working very hard on, and I know that they are very, very cognizant of this fact, is that VAs can't pay their own realtors. They can't accomplish any realtor fees whatsoever. That's part of the loan. They can't get the loan with that. And so right now, they're a little bit hard out of luck. If I'm a VA buyer right now, I'm looking hard to, and I need to buy, I'm trying to do that by July. They're going to get that figured out. I expect them to get that figured out pretty quickly, and maybe even in time for July, but I wouldn't roll the dice. Right. It's too big a thing to roll the dice. And right. I wouldn't go at it without a realtor.
Never. I would never go at it without a realtor, regardless of what kind of loan I'm doing. Mm-hmm. I mean, even if I'm just a cash buyer, I mean, right. I still want my realtor. Maybe
more so if you're a cash buyer. That's right. A lot of money you're putting into it. Make sure it's a good investment.
Right. Anything else? Any other questions that you feel like have been asked?
I have one more that I think is really important. And this is something that I've heard a lot of buyers, and I've heard a lot of sellers talk about it as well. And their thought is that with buyers having to pay their own commissions, that's going to lower the purchase price of homes. And I don't see that happening. I don't see that happening at all. In the first place, our market is about to catch fire again. It's been a little bit slow. We're already seeing not just sparks of life, but we have a nice little flame, and it's going to burst as soon as these interest rates come down just a little bit more. But with that said, is that for years, realtor fees have been included and are not into property valuations, but those property valuations are not there because of the realtor fees. When buyers have looked at homes and they've accomplished lender fees, which a lot of the time do rival what the realtor is making on the transaction, what the real estate brokerage is making on the transaction, those don't get counted in the appraisals. A cash transaction and a finance transaction, they're going to appraise the same. It's what a buyer is willing to pay. It's what a seller is willing to take. And I don't expect that to have a major shift at all in terms of what homes are available for, because I guarantee this, having worked with sellers primarily throughout my career, is that if a seller understands that they can make more money, a seller is going to make more money. And so although they might not be paying it directly to the buyer or to the buyer's agent, they're not going to be just offering it. And so expect those numbers to come down a little bit, but don't expect the purchase price to come down. Okay. Just the buyer's compensation.
All right.
Okay.
Well, again, thank you so much for your time and your knowledge. Always willing to share with us and help. And I appreciate you, and I'm sure that our viewers will too.
I love it. Have a great day. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.